Rob Stone here with you for an intensive SEC edition of Big Noon Kickoff, the offseason. The guys are going to join me in a moment to talk about the top teams in the SEC this season. The programs that may be a little bit under the radar right now. I'm looking at you, Start Vegas and Knoxville. Plus, the guys are going to talk about some of the breakout stars coming from the SEC this year. Reggie Bush is going to talk about a potential Heisman candidate in Tuscaloosa. But we're going to begin with Reggie Bush and Matt Leinart and Coach Kiffin live from Oxford, Mississippi, joining us right now. Coach, how in the world were Matt and Reg able to get you onto the big show here? Matt's got a job as a talent booker now these days.
He promised me that he would rock that jacket that I gave him 6 months ago that he's not worn once until today, though, by the way.
I did just break it out of the bag.
Found it quickly.
I knew exactly where it was. It was in the closet on the ground.
Right next to your Heisman.
Yeah.
We're going to talk some USC stuff a little bit later, but Coach, let's jump into your program right now. 4 straight non-winning campaigns in Oxford, and then you looked at the talent that you had assembled for you. What were your opening priorities leading into this camp for your first year at Ole Miss?
Well, we looked at a couple different jobs that were open. This was very intriguing, not just to get back to the SEC, but we looked at the roster. There's some really good young players, especially on offense, a number of freshmen that had really good seasons a year ago. And, it wasn't that long ago, 5 years ago, Ole Miss won the Sugar Bowl. And so when I was at Alabama, we lost 3 regular season games, I think 3 games period the entire time. And 2 of those games were to Ole Miss. And so I got to see firsthand when it was rolling here what it looked like. So it's not like we got to go create something that has never happened before.
And Kiff, on that, 4-8 last year, when you study the tape of this team and you study the film, what are some of the areas that your team needs to improve on in order to compete in the SEC West?
Well, on defense, there were some rough games on defense, and so we got to play better over there and eventually add more players to help us over there. Offensively, actually led the SEC in rushing, with a freshman running back and 2 freshman quarterbacks. So, we got to work on the passing game and developing that. But, there's some good things here.
Hey, Kiff, you just kind of alluded to, Ole Miss, being one of the top rushing teams in the SEC last year. And so there's something to build off of. But what is between you and Jeff Lebby, what's the offensive identity that you hope to bring to Ole Miss?
Well, we were familiar with it. We hired Kendall Browse at FAU our first year and ran what did you call, I guess, the Baylor system. And then, we integrated some of the stuff over the years that we've done all the way back to with you guys. So it's a combination now, but, what does look different is the tempo that we play with. We play extremely fast, but then try to put different elements into the system, to give people problems, but maintain the speed that we go with.
Yeah.
How about when you look at this 10-game conference schedule? Obviously, it's different, an unorthodox offseason, really a lack of an offseason. You get Florida and Alabama, 2 of the first 3 games of the season. How are you getting your team prepared for those early challenges you're going to face?
Well, we're not doing anything different than we would normally. But, it is obviously a lot more difficult when you don't have some other games in there that hopefully you play well in those games that get a little lopsided and you're able to, develop your talent and play different guys. You're going 10 SEC games only. So it's very challenging. But at the same time, too, it's exciting, to know that. And so, you should be preparing really hard and practicing really hard knowing that that's coming.
So what's the mindset then for your team now, knowing, and for your team and the coaching staff, really knowing that you're not going to get a ton of reps to prepare for some of these teams, but you're going to have to hit the ground running because the SEC is one of the toughest conferences out of the Power 5?
Yeah, Reggie, I mean, there's so many sets of obstacles here, that you mentioned, with not having those other games. But then also you've got this whole Corona factor. We lose kids, one day we come in and, we go to practice, and that morning we'll get a text, from the trainer that three kids are down and maybe 3 others had close contacts are down. So we're just trying to develop our entire roster because I think you're going to need it. And I think, everybody wants to learn the playbook and lift weights and run really fast. Well, that's all great. But maybe the biggest obstacle for teams is who's going to manage Corona the best to have the least kids out every week.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So sorry, I want to follow up really quick. One last thing. So do you simplify the playbook then?
We haven't. Ours has gotten a lot more simple than it used to be. When you guys played, we were more pro style back then. And so because of tempo reasons, we cut that terminology down, plays down. So it is a lot easier to play early now, I think, than it used to be.
Coach, you've won 5 different conference titles over the last 6 seasons with 5 different starting quarterbacks, and you've got yourself a bit of a quarterback quandary, probably a good one. You've got a one that can run it and one that can throw it. So how are you handling the quarterback battle right now in camp?
Well, Rob, we'll put you in charge of recruiting because I had not thought of that. Recruiting 5 championships with 5 different quarterbacks. So
you're welcome. I'm here for you, man. I'm a team player.
We'll tweet that out today. So these 2 guys, really excited to work with them. We've had 7 practices now, and Matt Correll, really talented arm strength and a young player. They were both just freshmen, so they'll both be sophomores this year. And then John Rice Plumlee, I think he had 1,000 yards rushing or close to it, as a freshman, which is really amazing in the SEC because a lot of those games were later in the year, not the early games. So it's awesome to have those guys to work with and see who starts, and most likely both will probably play.
Coach, let's transition real quickly to your formative days with Matt and Reg. What was your first impression of both of these guys when you were coaching them?
Extremely hard workers. I use that in our first team meeting every time. I list about 6 guys that I've been around, and Matt and Reggie are in there with Derrick Henry and Amari Cooper, that were the hardest workers, always first in, last to leave. I mean, Reggie would stay out there and run forever afterwards, after a long practice, and finish every run, 80 yards downfield. So just their work ethic and how they, helped others around them. And I really just wish, I say it all the time to our staff when we're installing offense, if I was able to know what I did now or back then with tempo and how we practice now, we never huddle, or how we play, we never huddle. We run, 15 more plays than we used to. These guys averaged 49.9 points a game with each other, and we were going slow. So I can only imagine what it would have been like.
Matt still complains that you didn't let him run it enough.
That's the only thing we wouldn't change.
You didn't want to see me run the ball. You know what I always say? It's so weird. Like
all these quarterback runs we have now, we would. That's the one thing we wouldn't be putting in.
Could you imagine me running the zone read? That would not be good. We were never in shotgun. I think that's always when I tell people, is like the only time we were ever in shotgun was, remember when I got hurt against Arizona State, and I was in like 4 or 5 plays, I think in 2003, but never, Rob, I'm telling you, 3rd and 8, full blitz up the middle, just under center. Never in shotgun, which is crazy now.
I mean,
you know how much stress that is for a running back, though, when you see linebackers up in the A gap, literally like arm's length distance away from the quarterback. You got to run up here.
Our offensive line was great, always.
No, we had a good offensive line, man.
Hey, Lane, what was the play or what were the set of plays that Reggie would always try to bug you about to run more?
He didn't do much of that. I think he really liked the offset. We went. That offseason when Reggie was young, like a freshman, we went down to Tampa with John Gruden and, got some passing game for the backs that they had done with Charlie Gardner out of the backfield. And so we started running, pick routes with him, our options with him, and some different routes out of there, which actually was pretty neat because then the Saints drafted him and they started running them, and so I remember Sean Payton say, we were watching your film with them and started putting these in. So it was pretty neat.
And they still running it. They still trying to run it. I can't replicate it though, Kip.
Oh, the good years, man.
Hey, Lane, I know offense is kind of your forte, and we see the evolution of offense through the years in college football. What do you see as kind of that new trend, offensively speaking, in college football?
Like I said, we go really fast. We have elements still of the pro style and USC, Alabama, and different places, but we're a lot more opened up. But what was interesting last year, if you look at it, 2 of the best offenses in the country went kind of old school in LSU and Alabama. You see them not playing with tempo. Now, they both had the best receivers in the country on their roster compared to everybody else combined, probably. But so that helped and Joe and Tua. But, you saw it go backwards a little bit. I don't know that it's going to go that way. But it may, things cycle back sometimes.
Hey, Kip, I got one question. Now this is your second time back in the SEC, and you've had, you've learned a lot throughout these years. Why is it going to be different for you this time around with Ole Miss?
Well, I think with anything, experience, that was, I think, 11 years ago when I was at Tennessee. And so been through a lot since then. And so, I'd like to think anybody, whatever it is, work, parenting, whatever it is, you get better with experience. And so, you just been through so many situations that maybe you hadn't before. And so like being a veteran player, you should be better in year 11 than you are in year 1.
What's your sales pitch to recruits right now besides, showing them the picture of Matt wearing the Ole Miss jacket right now?
We just talked to kids about being an exciting offense and playing fast. And we got a lot of players, obviously including these two to refer back to that we were able to coach and be around. And so that helps, it's neat. I still see kids in recruiting, wearing number 5, running backs. And I can tell, I get them on the phone the first time, I say, I bet Reggie Bush is your favorite player. They're like, yeah, that's why I wear that, so it's pretty cool. Just been fortunate to be around a lot of great players. And so a lot of first round picks and 4 Heisman winners in our, in our offenses. So, I think that helps.
We'll steal a snapshot of this picture of Matt for you so you can tweet it out later today. And if you sent gear to Reggie or myself, we would have put it on as well. I'm a medium. I don't know what Reggie's up to right now, but the biceps are still XL for Reg.
I'm gonna get Reggie a Lane Train shirt so he can rock it.
I'll rock the hell out of that shirt too. I'll rock it on our show. Send it to us. Send it to us for the show.
I will.
Love it, Coach. Hey, man, thanks for the time, and enjoy summer, enjoy the camp, enjoy beautiful Oxford, Mississippi. What a great location you're located in these days, man.
It sure is. You guys got a pretty good location too there, Rob.
Not so bad. Coach, we appreciate it. And as Lane makes his way back out onto the practice field or the film room, we bring in Urban and Joel to talk about the AP Top 25 preseason poll, which was released on Monday. And for the second straight year, it is Clemson beginning the season at number 1, Buckeyes at number 2. They're one of 6 from the Big Ten inside the preseason edition of the Top 25. But as usual, it's the SEC leading the pack with 7 teams, including 4 inside the top 8. Your defending national champs, LSU, checking in there at 6. Go down a little bit. North Carolina in the preseason top 25 for the first time since 2016. And Coach, Cincinnati, they make their first ever preseason AP top 25 appearance. But this whole top 25 is going to look very different in the next couple of weeks. 54 programs will lose their eligibility for the top 25, including 9 schools who are currently inside the AP top 25. The AP has said that they may do a spring top 25, little consolation for our friends at the Big Ten and the Pac-12. All right, so let's talk about the SEC this week. And last year, the SEC and the national title was won by LSU. But they lost 14 players to the NFL draft, including the number 1 overall pick, the Heisman winner, Joe Burrow, at quarterback. Right now, it's going to be Miles Brennan under center, just 70 career pass attempts for him. Another stat here, they return just 7 starters. That's lowest of any of the Power 5 schools. So, Reggie, I start with you. Where do you see LSU in the current SEC pecking order?
Well, I still like LSU a lot because they're defending national champs. And Matt knows this as well. When you're the defending national champs, that next season, you just play with a different energy and you just play with a different passion because this is, for one, this is the first one they won in a long time. The players know that. So they're going to be eager to live up to what they did last year. They're going to want to try to repeat what they did last year. Obviously, that's easier said than done. And when you look at the amount of people that they lost, you listed a lot of players, also Joe Brady as well, the offense coordinator. That's a lot of pieces to lose. So I say this with an asterisk because I know how tough it's going to be for this team this year. But they do still have the captain of their ship, Coach Ed Orgeron, who will have you ready to run through a brick wall before a game with his pregame speeches and with just the way that he prepares you for football games. He's still the captain of that ship. And as long as they got Coach Orgeron, I still believe in him because I know his DNA. I know what he brings to the table. but it's going to be tough for them this year. And it's going to be tough for everybody this year. So that's why I say they're still the national defending champion. I know they lost Joe Brady, but guess what? Alabama lost Tua, right? So there's other teams that have lost other players, good players, which happens every year. That's a part of college football. That's what happens year in, year out. So I still like LSU a lot. Until somebody knocks them off, they're the national defending champs.
Alabama last year, Matt, first time in program history, they were not invited to the college football playoffs. A big reason that folks think they will get that invite back this season, an improved defense.
Yeah, and a guy named Dylan Moses. Remember, they lost last year, who's a heart and soul and really the quarterback, their middle linebacker. Remember, we talked to Steve Sarkisian earlier this summer, just the effect that he has on that defense, and it's outstanding. So he's back in a really talented group. And then on the offensive side of the ball, a lot of pressure and a lot of talk about Mac Jones. And this is a guy, it's not going to be a game manager type situation. He averaged over 10 yards per completion last year. He still has Waddle. He still has Devontae Smith. And he has, in my opinion, maybe the best offense line in the country. And that guy right there, I know Reggie's a big fan of, Najee Harris. So this is a loaded offense. Defensively, they're always talented. They're always good. And in this type of situation where there's just disarray in the schedule and all this, I trust a team that's been there year in and year out over the past, seems like 2 decades. So that's why I have Alabama with a much improved defense with their leader back and just all Americans all over the offense.
Yeah, Matty, you know what's interesting to me, and Coach, we talk a lot about this in particular with this season and losing the offseason and how important it's going to be to have continuity in your coaching staff. And Alabama has that, which has not been the norm under Nick Saban, and LSU does not. LSU basically loses both their coordinators. I know Steve Ensminger is still there, but they lose Dave Aranda, they lose Joe Brady, whereas Steve Sarkisian and Pete Golding are there for Alabama. They get Dylan Moses back. Explosiveness on the outside with their wide receivers, a great running back, 4 starters on the offensive line. Mac Jones, who played big, meaningful snaps, including in the Iron Bowl last year in kind of a shootout against Auburn. I think this team is primed to make a run. This screams to me to be a bit of a bounce back year for Alabama and Nick Saban, where they can and potentially will not only win the SEC, but the national championship. Depending on how that all plays out at the end of the season. But, Coach, I'll go back to what I started with. When you've got that continuity in your coaching staff, which Nick Saban generally does not have, that is a big feather in the cap for Saban and the Tide moving into this season.
Coach, 3 years ago, your former program, Florida, they went 4-7. Dan Mullen comes in, led him to a 10-win campaign, 11 wins last season. What's the expectation level like in Gainesville this season?
Well, it's very high. That's why I picked the Florida Gators to be the SEC champs. I agree with everything said so far. The only difference maker that I've said is, number one is going to be culture. And I think the programs you have at the top of the SEC have a very strong culture with LSU, Alabama, Georgia. However, Dan Mullen's a winner. He won at Mississippi State, a very hard place to play. He's got an elite culture. And the 2 other criteria I had, returning quarterback and returning system. LSU, Alabama, Georgia all lose their quarterback. And without, with the limited spring practice and all the other issues that we've had to face through this lockdown, that's why I'm picking Florida. I think they're going to have another top 10 defense they've had the last couple of years under Todd Grantham. I think it's going to be very close. The thing to keep in mind, and I said this earlier, I think there's going to be teams that lose 2 games each, the top teams, because they're not used to playing that 10-game schedule. If you really studied the other schedules throughout the years, Alabama never really left Alabama to play. They play their road games, but they always have that FCS opponent before a big game. Those are all gone. Now you look at their schedules, and it's going to be really hard. It's going to be survival of the fittest. And I just think Florida, with that culture, returning quarterback, and also returning offensive system, I'm picking them in a very tight race.
Klatt, I want to throw one to you real quick. Where do you put the odds on 2 from the SEC making the playoffs this year?
Is there something over 100? When we look at that, you showed the top 25, and after you grade out some of those teams, basically you've got Clemson and then Oklahoma and Notre Dame are the only other top 10 teams that are outside of the SEC, and you got all those teams loaded in there. We didn't even talk about Georgia yet. We kind of briefly mentioned that they're loaded. They've got great culture as well, and they win at a high level. There's going to be other teams that I think are very difficult, and to Coach's point, are going to make it difficult on the cream of the crop to go through undefeated. Teams like Texas A&M and Tennessee, Auburn, those teams are all going to be improved. To put a percentage on it, somewhere north of 100% will be the high percentage. Yes.
Right. All right. Let's take a look at what the fans voted. We threw out a poll on our Twitter site, and Bama checking in, over half of our voters saying it's going to be Roll Tide Roll. And then Florida, there's Georgia checking in at third, and then others coming in at fourth. Let's talk about some of those other programs, some programs that we think are going to be better than expected this season. And Coach, let's start with Auburn. 4 losses last year, but all of them came against ranked opponents.
I do. I think Auburn recruits really well. I think they got a very good coaching staff, and they got a quarterback. And this guy's a multi-purpose. We loved him last year at the beginning of the year. I think the step between first year and second year starter, and we have a couple quarterbacks on this call, the difference is phenomenal. Every time you start a quarterback as a young player, the jump he makes from year 1 to year 2. And I think Bo Nix, he's a football guy from a football family and a heck of a program. I think he's going to lead this team to – I got him in my top 5. I think they're going to be right there.
Back-to-back losing seasons for Tennessee. Jeremy Pruitt, though, last year got the Vols up to 8 wins, and they returned 17 starters. That's tied for most in the SEC, Maddie.
Yeah, remember week 1 last year, they lose to Georgia State. And then I think the following week they lose to BYU, and everyone's kind of, they're an embarrassment, and Tennessee, they're not back. And then, as you mentioned, Rob, they went on that run. They won 6 in a row to finish the season. And we all know what that can do to a team moving into the next season, the confidence and the morale, and say, hey, we got talent. We can go out there and play. And again, this wasn't a normal off season where you couldn't really build that chemistry and all that. But talk about a loaded team. They have 2 top 15 recruiting classes in the last couple of years. A quarterback back, a trio of running backs who are really talented. We know they have a lot of speed and athleticism. This is a team that is loaded on both sides of the football, return a lot of starters, a lot of experience. And again, as Coach said, this is going to be a season where, a 7-3, 8-2 winner out of the East or West may go to the conference championship. And I think Tennessee has a real shot, if they can start strong, to upset some of these top teams and make a run for the SEC East.
Yeah, and Maddie, 5 returning offensive linemen. That's a big deal right up front. I'm with you. I think Tennessee could be a team that's better than we expect. In particular, when you have that many returning starters, I think a big factor is how you finished the previous year. And think about their last 5. They win their last 5 in order to get bowl eligible, and then they win their bowl game. Garantano comes off the bench in 5 games and then starts the last 3, plays very well. So he's kind of an incumbent guy. Kasem Hill is the transfer from Maryland. They're a really good team. Second-year coordinators on both sides of the ball. So, Coach, not only do they have their quarterback, they've got the system in place now. They're not having to change their system. And they've got some momentum and returning starters from last season at the end. So watch out for Tennessee. In a weird year, this could be a year where they make some noise.
Boy, Tennessee used to be I know Reggie and Matt are way too young to remember this, but Tennessee used to be, the monsters of the East. When I first got to Florida, that stadium, that fan base, I'd love to see Tennessee start to make another push again, because that used to be as difficult a place to play in America. And you haven't heard from Tennessee in a long time.
Coach, do you remember Steve Spurrier's line about Tennessee?
What was that?
Can't spell citrus without UT. Love that one. Little dagger from the old ball coach. Speaking of daggers, Reg, you know a guy who likes to throw daggers and then throw some more daggers and then a few more and then just keep on throwing it. Mike Leach has brought that offense down to Starkville. Mississippi State is going to be a really intriguing team to watch this year.
Yeah, I think this is the team I'm most excited to watch, because I think this is going to be the most improved team. When you talk about Mike Leach, whose offenses have put up more numbers and have been more exciting than a Mike Leach offense, no matter where he's been, no matter what university he's been at. He's been able to take quarterbacks who we haven't heard of and really elevate them to a high level of play. You think about quarterbacks like Gardner Minshew, where they got the Minshew mania in Jacksonville right now, which is, he's a product of, coming through that Mike Leach system. So I'm so excited to see what Mike Leach can do, because he's now in the SEC. He's now in a conference where we all view to be one of the toughest conferences, one of the most physical conferences, especially with a lot of those big boys up front from Auburn and Alabama's. These are the kind of defenses that can get after the quarterback. But then you're giving Mike Leach a quarterback like KJ Costello. I believe this is the highest rated quarterback he's ever had, right? So you give him that, and then you give him a really good running back, Kylan Hill. So you're giving him a lot of weapons at a time period where we talk about these teams not having a lot of reps. Well, when you play a Mike Leach offense, what is he going to do? He's going to spread you out, and he's going to dink and dunk. He's going to throw that football all over the field, and he's going to become a defense coordinator's worst nightmare. So I can't wait to see what he does this year, because there's so many variables. There's so many variables with the pandemic and with guys, deciding to play or not to play. But I can't wait to see what he does in this conference this year, because I want to see how these SEC defenders, play against this air raid offense.
One program we haven't talked about that I think is going to surprise some folks, Texas A&M. Remember last year, the first team in the AP poll era to take on 3 different number 1 ranked programs. They went 0-3 versus those number 1 ranked teams, but they're led by a quarterback who is going to start off our conversation about players that we're most excited to see. Kellen Mond down at Texas A&M, Matt, he can put up some big numbers as long as those numbers aren't turnovers. You get those turnover numbers down, watch out for A&M.
Well, you just look at the numbers there, and 1 of 2 players, 7,000 plus pass yards, 1,000 rush yards. I mean, Johnny Manziel, we know how great he was. Kellen Mond is a really talented player, and when I look at this season, he can have a Heisman type season where he can be in the mix because that's the type of talent he has and the players around him, or he can just have a season where they go 7-3 or 6-4, and they win some games and they lose some games. And I just think it is now the time for him to elevate the team around him and take the team on his back and go out and win football games and go out and beat Alabama, go out and beat LSU. They return almost everybody. Actually, one of the most experienced teams coming back in the SEC. I talked about just what he brings. He's a dual threat quarterback, so he obviously can put a lot of pressure on defenses. I really like this kid. I think he can, if he takes that next step and is more consistent, the sky is the limit. And you go back, I don't know if we have a graphic coming up, but you go back to the last couple of years, he actually played his best in some of the biggest games against the best teams. Now, they lost 3 of these 4 games, but you look at who they played against and you look at the numbers, and it's pretty remarkable. Now, those losses, they got to turn into wins, and he's got to find ways to win football games at the end. I'm excited for him. I think Texas A&M, we've kind of, I know Joel would agree with me. They've kind of been a fool's gold team the last couple of years. Preseason top 25, watch out, and then they finish 8-5. This might be the year where they take that next step because of their quarterback.
They were 0-5 versus top 10 opponents last season. Joel, one of the main themes that we've pulled away from these shows we put together the last couple of months is we think highly of programs that already have established quarterbacks in place, which means Florida is looking good this year.
Yeah, and Coach touched on it, with Kyle Trask and Dan Mullen. I think there's 2 things that really allow a quarterback to take the next step. One is when you have a coach that really understands the game and teaches it well. And people always ask me, like, well, what does that mean, teach it well? It means that you don't just teach your quarterback what to do, or where to throw the football, but why he's doing it. The why is so important, and I believe Dan Mullen does that. He teaches the why, which means Kyle Trask is going to continue to understand the game better and better, and he's already a high efficient player, 67% throwing the football. He had a very high touchdown interception ratio. I believe it was somewhere like 25-7 last year. He ended on a great stretch, 3 of 4 games thrown for over 300 yards, and he's got a great team around him. That, to me, is a recipe for a really big year for a quarterback. So I think Kyle Trask could be one of those guys we're talking about, maybe a potential Heisman chase for a guy in particular if they have a season like Coach was talking about earlier, where they're not only winning the East, but potentially winning the SEC outright.
And QBs love it when they have a tight end they can lean on, Coach. And Kyle Pitts last year at Florida led all SEC tight ends with receptions and receiving yards.
Yeah, one thing before I talk to Kyle is I was just messing around with the schedule, and something that this whole country is going to watch closely is there was a time that we used to talk about October when I was a coach of the Gators, and we would play Tennessee, LSU, Georgia, Auburn, and Alabama right in a row. Just think about that for a minute. When you think about everyone else's schedules that you're dealing with, that's going to be all throughout the SEC now because you're playing a 10-game schedule without those bye weeks, or well, there's a bye week, but without the FCS opponents and the other easy ones in there. So that's going to be, I'm going to watch that really closely because I remember coaching through that. And you're on life support sometimes trying to get through those games because it's so difficult, so physical. But you're back to the tight end. So I kept hearing about Kyle Pitts. I'm very close with Dan Mullen. He thinks the world of him. That guy's outstanding. I mean, he's a receiver playing tight end. He's a matchup nightmare. And like Joel said, you get a coach like Dan Mullen that's an expert in that. Everyone looks for the hybrid player. And a hybrid player is the guy that's maybe it's an outside linebacker, can rush a quarterback like a DN, but also cover someone. It's the nickel corner that can hit you, but also play man-to-man and offense. It's that tight end that is a matchup nightmare for a linebacker or a safety because you can't put a corner on him. And this guy, I went back and watched him. He's a receiver playing tight end. And once again, with Kyle Trask at quarterback, Dan Mullen calling the plays, this guy's going to have a 70, 80 catch season. And watch. I've been with Dan. He's going to go to him in the most difficult times, and this guy's going to have a big-time year.
Hey, Reg, are you tired of all these quarterbacks winning Heisman trophies lately?
I am tired of all these quarterbacks winning Heisman trophies, man. It's disrespectful to the running backs.
Oh, hey, well, then give me a running back that can win the Heisman from the SEC.
Najee Harris. I like Najee Harris a lot, and I call him Derrick Henry 2.0, right? And if you think about Derrick Henry, he's one of the most feared running backs in the NFL because of his size and the ferociousness with the way he attacks the hole and attacks linebackers. But Najee Harris can do all those things that Derrick Henry can do, and then he's also elusive, and he also can jump over people like we're seeing right here. He also has routes. He has hands. He can do a lot of different things. And I really think he has an opportunity to win the Heisman Trophy this year, especially with now two of the Power 5 conferences we know aren't going to be playing football. I think this gives Nick Saban a chance to get back to some of that old school football that he likes, that old school mentality, that ground and pound. That's what Najee Harris can do. He can ground and pound. He can run the football outside. You can line him up at receiver. I think he's the ultimate weapon, and I really think highly of him. And I think we're going to see a lot of highlights from Najee Harris this year playing running back for Alabama.
Quickly, Rob, I just, when Reggie's talking, something pops into my mind right now, and that is when he talks about the ground and pound, right? And I wonder, Coach, we keep talking about this schedule in the SEC and how difficult it's going to be for these teams, and I agree completely with you. And I wonder if some of these teams will lean more on their run game in order to reduce total number of snaps. See, because that's when you're playing this like really fast tempo, high offense, what you're doing is you're snapping the ball 80, 85, 90 times per game. What that becomes is really detrimental to your defense because they're out there just far too long and it's tough for them to stay healthy and fresh throughout the season. So I wonder if a guy like Nick Saban and Najee Harris, Reggie, to your point, if they get back to maybe snapping it 62 times per game to try to give their defense a rest, knowing that they're going to be going through much more of a difficult gauntlet through their regular season schedule than they have in previous years. Just something to watch for as the game is going to change to some degree with these new schedules and protocols. And how is it going to change? Maybe it's back to the running back, boys.
Let me add one thing about that schedule that the viewer and a lot of people might understand. On the surface, a hard schedule is a hard schedule, but here's what it also means. Your backups aren't going to get to play. And so when a backup gets forced into you're not playing those 3 easy games during the preseason where you get those young players a chance to go. You're also resting your old players. And then also, this is something that used to wear me out. Your Tuesday practice is usually awful because your guys are on bikes, your guys are in the training room, your guys are banged up. So your Tuesday preparation. So it's a domino effect when you play a schedule like the SEC is about to play. So yeah, on the surface, it's a very, very hard schedule. But that's just the beginning of it. Now your backups are not going to play. And when one of those backups has to come in at a key moment, a lot of the times they're not ready. I've had to go through that. And then the Tuesday practice, which is your big prep day, a lot of your players are over there not ready to go. And a lot of times you're just not prepared, as that's because the games come on you so fast when you're playing games like this, because they're so complicated, the defenses and offenses. So I think the viewer, and I'm going to watch that so close this year, the wear and tear of a tough schedule is undervalued in my mind when people pick winners and losers of conferences.
And Coach, that's if the schedules stay put. Already today, we've seen North Carolina State having to push back a game a couple of weeks because of an outbreak on their campus and with their program. So I think we all know that we see a printed schedule or something on a magnet that's on our washer or dryer refrigerator. We all know that thing is going to change through the course of the season. All right, time for the logo game, and we're going to step away from the SEC and jump back into the Pac-12. Joel and Coach, we're going to give you first dibs on the logo and what this logo means big picture to you. And then Reg and Matt, I have a feeling you guys will chime in on a different angle with this logo. So here is this week's edition of the logo game, brought to you from Westwood, California. All right, so Urban and Joel, your thoughts on what UCLA is right now in football terms?
Well, I'm not going to go what they are now. I'm going to say what I remember Terry Donahue, and when I was a young coach at Colorado State, and they were the talk of the town, man. That coach and the coaching staff, they had great players, those incredible uniforms. You saw them playing in the Rose Bowl. And, I'm just a football fan now, and I want to see UCLA get back. I'm just worried that, when's that going to happen? But I think of the great history that they used to have.
Yeah, Coach, I second that, and even had to play a couple of those teams at the tail end of that, not under Terry Donahue, but played the Maurice Jones-Drew, Mercedes Lewis teams from UCLA, and Reggie and Matt, as you guys know, they were formidable during some of those years before kind of this downward spike. And then of late, Coach, I agree with you about the history perspective, but in recent vintage, they've been a disappearing act, right? And in particular, I think what was so alarming was to watch the highly rated recruiting classes come in under Jim Mora after Rick Neuheisel left, and then Jim Mora had all those really highly ranked recruiting classes, and nothing materialized on the field. That was disappointing, I think, to a larger extent. And now with Chip, we're just waiting, and that's why I say it's kind of it's like, where are they? And we keep waiting for them to try to emerge from this funk, and we'll see if they can at any point here in the next couple of years.
A few things for me. To be honest with you, I'd love to see UCLA get back. I'd love to see USC and UCLA get back because it makes the rivalry much better. It makes the city of LA, the pride, and all the things that we used to play for. I grew up a UCLA football fan, the Cade McNown era when they were rolling. I mean, they were awesome. Rose Bowls every year, and obviously, I'm a Trojan. It didn't work out. But I would love to see them get back. Nothing but respect for that school. But I will say this: I just had to pull up. I forgot, Reg, what our I never lost to UCLA. It was 5-0, 3 years as a starter. 47, 22, 29, 24, and 66, 19. And the only reason why I say that, we always played them at the end of the year, and we always had to beat them to get to what would happen to be a Rose Bowl or a national championship game. So I always remember beating UCLA and having the rose in our mouth, Reg. I don't know if you remember that, the game that you went off in 2004, as then we got to prepare to play for Oklahoma. So,
is that when he hurdled at the pylon? Is that picture where Reggie's like 8 feet in the air, just like hurtling over a guy?
Reggie used to unnecessarily do these flips and hurdles in the end zone.
I had to get in the end zone, man. I had to make sure, because if I got tackled at the one, they was going to get a ball to Lindell.
Pretty sure you weren't going to get caught from that.
It happened to me one time. Before. It was actually in the Fresno State game, right?
I remember.
I'll show you the exact play, okay? I stuck my arm out, and I put the ball on the 1 yard line. It was a touchdown, by the way, and the ref didn't give it to me. He was blind as a bat, all right? So then they give the ball to Lindell on the 1 yard line. I'm like, come on, man, you serious? Like, I did all that work. I did 5 tackles, had to hurdle like 3 people, and I stick the ball to one, and then you get a ball to Lindell, man.
So that's why in that game, that's where it was probably later in the game, you took that ball down this left sideline, and you kind of back up on a guy, and you're like, no. I am not getting caught. I am going to the house.
I refused to get caught, man. There was competition all the time between, us and our teammates, but it was friendly competition. But one of the things that I would love to see about UCLA, I would love to see them as well get back to that greatness, those eras that Coach just spoke about, because I do believe that when UCLA and USC is really good and those rivalries are just fierce and competitive, that's when the Pac-12, I believe, is going to be at its highest. That's when I believe college football as well will elevate when we have some of those old school rivalries kind of renewed. And I would love to see that rivalry renewed and just back to kind of that battle for LA.
We'll see it in the spring, Reg. Again, I'm trying to be optimistic here. USC, UCLA.
I love it. Nice, Stoner.
Spring. That's right. And who knows, maybe we'll have bodies in stadiums by then here in Southern California. Guys, great seeing you again. Next week, we're going to reconvene. We're going to talk ACC. And for years, the ACC conversation, it's just been Clemson. Now we got a couple programs also ranked in the preseason, Notre Dame and North Carolina, who's really been resurgent under Mac Brown. So it'll be all things ACC next week. And Coach, hurry up. I think they're calling your name on the tee box right now.
Onward.